Good morning from both me and unexpected early bird, Philip.
Yes, but I'm not visible, am I?
No.
I'll
Why
have
is
to redo,
that?
I'll have to redo myself.
Very well. Thank you and welcome to another Monday morning. It's just myself and Ada in the Black Horse this morning. Well, it's my doppelganger. Philip is in Arundel. Susie is back, but whether she's so tired from traveling, I have no idea. So maybe Susie. And what an exciting combination of people. Why then?
Well, I'm sorry about this, Keith. I'm being more of a nuisance than a help. I just don't know what's happened here.
No, you just haven't got your mic, your camera switched on, probably. It's easily done.
It is switched on because it checks it before I join you. Anyway, I'll keep trying. You carry on, Bean.
All right. Here we are. The Gremlins have decided to go to Arundel this morning and leave Lewis. Out of the window, through which we're not allowed to gaze because of various strange rules. But it is Western Road. And across Western Road is a green patch, lovingly preserved. And that green patch is a historic site. And there we are. There's Philip.
Yes,
good morning, Philip.
Good morning to you and everybody, Keith. I just thought before I drove the delights of Bognor with my wife that I would just do a few minutes with you to say hello.
Well, that's an unexpected pleasure.
Well, you're a sweetheart.
How far is Bognor from you?
It's about a 25-minute drive. At this time, 25 minutes. You can do it in less, but we're having to go, well, what here is rush hour. No, I just wanted to tell you about my wife's day yesterday, because I mentioned to you before, I have mentioned to you that she is a singer in the local choral society, Arran Choral Society.
Indeed, you have.
And yesterday was the day she went up to the Albert Hall with her choir. And they contributed to a total of 2,000 singers. 2,000
hymns.
2,000 singers.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yes, go on.
Ahead. Shall I carry on?
No, I was just querying your figure, that's all. 2,000 singers.
Total choir, a total collective choir, which includes Jackie's choir. So it's a number of choirs all getting together.
Right.
Totaling 2,000 singers.
Wow.
in the Albert Hall.
And that was in the Albert Hall.
The Albert Hall, and they sang Mozart's Requiem.
Wow.
And
oh, gosh. That is impressive.
it was, and it sounds impressive. And what added to her pleasure was not just it was a lovely day and she was with friends and colleagues and it was the Albert Hall, but our younger son, Oliver, and his girlfriend turned up, and then Oliver stayed and watched the performance. So he watched the whole of the Requiem with his mum singing in it in the Albert Hall. And what impressed her the most was you'll relate to this in terms of age. She said there was this absolutely wonderful professional conductor, aged 80, who conducted beautifully all 2,000 singers. So a very pleasing day. And I'm glad she avoided being down here, not because of me, but because yesterday, if it's a sunny Sunday down here, we call it Bikers Day, because the Ford Road to our right is a very, very popular straight road for hordes, and I'm talking Hell's Angel level groups of bikers. And the noise.
You mean motorbikers, not bicyclists?
Oh, not bicyclists. They're too scared to get on the Ford Road on a Sunday. We do see cyclists, but it's a very, even forgetting motorcyclists, it's a very, very dangerous road to cycle on. Mm-hmm. I know that because I used to do it. When I was younger and my knee hadn't conked out, I did used to cycle to Ford Station and back to get the train and save money on cabs. And it's a very, very dangerous road. But so that was Jackie's day yesterday. She didn't get back till really quite late. So I was glad she was back. And yeah, she's had a bit of a lie-in this morning because it's back to work for her tomorrow. I mean, normally you see at this time I'd be in the car, having dropped her off at Slindon. I'd be on my way back now.
Instead, you're here, and you'll be dropping her off later.
Well, yes, we have to leave in 10, 15 minutes to get to sunny Bognor. But it's very dull here. It's very overcast. In complete contrast to yesterday, but I must confess I'm not a great fan, sadly, of direct sunlight. I get burned very easily, and too much sun makes me feel really quite odd. But there we are. It's nice to have a very nice day. So have you, I noticed you started at 7:20 this morning.
Yeah. I was in here at about 7:10. I avoided the sunlight yesterday as well, but for different reasons. My Parkinson's decided to have one of its nasty days.
Oh dear.
Although I'd got lavish plans for the day, in fact, I didn't even get dressed. I had my dressing gown on and I was totally naked underneath. But since I was the only one in the apartment to see me in the mirror and look aghast at this awful figure walking by, it didn't matter. But
I'm sure it was. Well, it just takes us back to the carnal knowledge days, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a revisiting.
Without getting too intimate, it's amazing how little we change behind. It's all in the front. The changes take place.
Quite so. quite so. I think
But
anybody who listens to that now or later will, particularly bloke, will completely know what you mean. But so you said, but you were able to walk, were you?
yes, Parkinson's is a strange disease. I mean, I've had it for what, over 10 years now, and progressively, I mean, for 7 or 8 of those years, I just laughed at it and just told it to bugger off. But it's coming back with a vengeance now, and as it progresses, so it gets worse, and it gets worse rather faster than it has in the past. So I never know on any given day whether I can stand, walk, or whatever. Yesterday was I will tip you over at the touch of a button day, and so on those days, even though I defy it, and I'm in a quite a small sort of bachelor apartment now, I have to feel my way carefully across the apartment, and the idea of going out is that really is daring, because the chances are that I will get out, fall over, and not get back, and so I shall be a slowly rotting corpse in the middle of the road somewhere.
Well, we won't go that far, but yes. Yeah, for all these years, you've basically told it to bugger off, as you say, which is an act of defiance. But sadly, these progressive diseases do precisely that. And, you know, my wife, Jackie, as I've mentioned before, has MS, which could get worse any day. She's amazing with it. It is generally the least progressive type currently, which is called relapsing remitting. So she'll have a relapse, and there have been some very scary moments, mainly for her, but also those of us who care for her. Like one time she lost her vision, which was very, very scary.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And, you know, she's recently had a load of checkups, including scans, and the scars on the brain, the scleroses, have increased. They have multiplied. And that's the progression of the disease. So she would understand exactly what you're saying. Not that I don't, but, you know, thus far, I'm fairly lucky. I don't think I've got anything like that yet, and hopefully never. But yes, it will get worse, and there are limits, obviously, Keith, to being able to say, look, bugger off. At least now you're making a sensible decision to say, right, mate, it's a bad day. It's a bad day at the apartment. I'm not going out. Which, ironically, I think is this is the decision that Richard Barton's having to make. You know.
Yes, I suspect that it is. The strange thing is, I mean, I think that Richard is probably, even though he's upsetting us a little bit by not communicating, and I'm a communicator, so I don't mind telling people, bugger off, today's an off day. But we don't ask for sympathy, but we do ask for understanding.
Yes.
And it's amazing how many people don't understand Parkinson's. And those people who suffer, and there are a number of famous people, if you like, but in this country, perhaps one of the leading exponents of it is Jeremy Paxman.
Yes, well,
who is very active.
He found, in fact, there was a photograph of them all at Downing Street about a month ago, because he founded this action group they call them the Movers and Shakers.
That's it.
And they were submitting a petition to Downing Street, wanting more transparency and understanding of the disease. Because Paxman said that day, he said, having Parkinson's, there are days you wish you'd never been born, which is a very, very extremely sad thing to say. But that's how it makes him feel. Now, I suspect you don't feel like that because you are a fighter and you love life. You love doing this TV. You like communicating with people. So you will always find something to compensate. Did they not install helpful rails and holding points in your apartment, Keith?
Yes, and I'm getting some more in a couple of weeks' time because they installed some and then I tested to see which ones were useful and which ones weren't. I mean, the internal things that are slightly amusing is I have what's called a perch stool, and I have one in the bathroom, small though the bathroom is.
Yeah.
And I sit down to shave.
Yes.
And when I look at myself in the mirror shaving, sitting down, I can't help but start to giggle. I mean, it is so ludicrous.
I don't know about ludicrous. It sounds rather comfortable to me. But do you shower sitting down?
Yes, I do now. Yeah. But that is a very, very recent thing because what I find difficulty in doing is standing.
That's why I asked.
But actually, I came across a nice group of people on Saturday because the Red Devil, my scooter, ran out of juice on Friday, the last day of broadcasting last week. I had to leave it at the pub, and Dec, who always looks after us, he looks after Mirador, he looks after me, put it on charge in the pub garden. So I came in on the bus and took the opportunity to go and get one or two things in town before I picked up the scooter. And when I got back, there was a crowd gathering. And of course, it was one of my favorite occasions, the anniversary of the Battle of Lewes.
Oh, right.
And people say, well, what is the objective of Mirador? And it's very difficult to say because we do so many different things. But I think that at the core of Mirador is that we protect freedom of speech. Because, as you know, you revel in chatting to our colleague Harry Atterton, who, by his own admission, has very sharp views about things, but they are always about protecting the freedoms which we knew as children, as young men, as growing up in the United Kingdom. He is particularly vocal when it comes to protecting free speech. But so are you, and so am I. It's interesting. I haven't had a chance to read it this morning, but we are talking about cutting loose from the WHO and the World Health Organization.
I didn't know that.
Well, I didn't until it just popped up on the front page of the Financial Times, and of course it's not a totally simple thing getting ready to broadcast. You have to plug this in and test that and so on. So I haven't had a chance to read that particular section yet, but the fact is that. Liza Page has been saying that for a year or more on this program, and been criticized by the establishment for it. And at one point, we were knocked off YouTube because of that view. and they're all having to eat humble pie. And Liza is not terribly well at the moment because is like a lot of us, she's in her 80s. And doing the things that she still does is a bit of a strain, and she feels it sometimes. And when I told her that some of her views were beginning to gain ground, it acted as a medicine for her. She started to buck up. So there are interesting things happening in the world where freedom of speech. Oh, and also the government at long last is waking up to the lobbying power of wokes. So all sorts of things are happening that we've been pushing for 3 or 4 years, I suppose. So I think that you can sit there feeling very self-satisfied, Philip, because you're part of that team.
Well, thank you. I like to think I'm never self-satisfied. But as far as freedom of speech is concerned, I've learned a lot from my wife, Jackie, whilst doing Mirador, because there have been times I have obviously been very indiscreet. And she's understandably told me off. So I do try and learn. I mean, Harry's an extraordinary man, not unlike yourself. The other thing I would say about Harry, and I would say it to him directly, is he has these strict topics that he always comes back to. I'm not saying he's predictable, but it's the same stuff. And his current soapbox is this net zero nonsense. There's a young lady just popped up.
Just joined us.
Hey, I thought I'd try a new approach this morning. I'll see if it works.
Well, it's working.
I think there's my sound that's a bit rubbish. I'm walking at the minute.
No, we can hear you very, very nicely.
In Haysden Park in Tonbridge.
Oh, you're over in Kent.
Yeah, it's my school run these days. My daughter's doing her GCSE, so I'm just waiting for her to finish her exam rather than drive all the way back to Sussex.
Yeah.
How are you both?
Well, yeah, I'm good. It's nice to see you. Sadly, because I've now got a taxiing duty to do. I'm afraid I'm going to leave you, but I'm glad I'm not leaving Keith alone, because you know what he gets up to. So I will say lovely to see you, Susie.
Do my best. I can't hear very well, so it's whether that's my phone or just where I am.
Well, we can hear you.
That's good.
You could try earphones if you have a phone that takes earphones, unlike me. The modern phones don't have earphone things.
No. The microphone's on.
Anyway, like I say, forgive me. I'll see you all soon. Have a nice day.
Nice to see you briefly, Philip.
Bye, Philip. Morning, Susie.
Morning, Keith. How are you? Long time no see.
Yes, indeed. Tell everybody where you've been and what you've been up to.
I've been to Fuerteventura. It looks like I've got no hair, but I've got it up in a ponytail. So, yeah, I've been back a couple of days, and now you're on my dog walk with me.
Teddy's with you?
Yeah, Teddy's in front of me chasing squirrels. But because it's GCSE, my daughter finishes at 11, and it takes me 40 minutes to drive back to Sussex. So I just thought I'd take you on my dog walk this morning.
It's a very early examination, isn't it?
Well, she starts at 9, but I need to get her there early so she can get in the zone and sort of
settle down,
get in the right mind frame.
Right. So
Found a
she's in the
bench.
examination hall now, is she?
I found a bench to sit on. That's what I was looking for. So what was that again?
So she's in the examination hall now, is she?
Yeah, she will start at 9, so finishes at 11. So I thought rather than drive all the way back to Sussex and back again, I'll go and walk in the park and see if I can join you.
You're right. Well, I'm glad you did. The picture's great. Yeah. You're right. The sound is just a little high, but I mean, better that than too low.
Yeah. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely. Loud and clear. Yeah. So you've been to where you've been in Spain or Portugal?
Canary Islands. So yeah, Fuerteventura. So
Right.
very nice out there, and no tourists. There's no protests. I think on Tenerife there's a lot of protests going on for the over tourism.
Right. Is the Canary Islands self-sufficient, or is it part of either?
They're part of Spain.
It's part of Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I when I was 15, which was 200 years ago, I flew to Canada, and this was before jets. We flew on what called turboprops, and we left London and flew to the islands that are Portuguese in the Atlantic.
Right.
I knew their name when I started to talk, and now, of course, I've forgotten them. It begins with an A. But we got off. In those days, all you got on board an aircraft was a cup of coffee and a biscuit. You got off to have your meals, and it was
Really?
breakfast. Yes, that's right.
Wow.
2 o'clock in the morning is when we got off on this Portuguese territory. And the thing that struck us, where we were escorted to the terminal by police in black uniforms and jackboots, because Portugal was then under a dictatorship, and they were totally unsmiling. No
Wow.
greetings. Tourism was almost unheard of in those days. From there, we flew up to Gander in Newfoundland and got off in the air terminal, which later became famous because it's where all the jets were diverted when the Twin Towers were attacked. They diverted
right.
all. They closed the airspace, and the people of Gander. There weren't enough hotels to look after all these passengers, and the people of Gander opened up their homes and looked after the passengers on the flight. But we went into the terminal, and by that time it was time to have dinner, because it took 28 hours to fly out there. Believe it or not. We got back in 22 because we got tailwinds, but 28 hours. And I always remember the very first words that I ever heard on Canadian soil was the girl going down asking us what we wanted to eat: roast beef or cod fillet, roast beef or cod fillet, roast beef or cod fillet. That was a choice that you had, and you said at the horseshoe counter.
Wow. Now we get told that EasyJet have got no food or drinkable. I came EasyJet and they go, we have no food on EasyJet, so you've got to bring your own.
Yeah, I know. I've only ever flown EasyJet once. The safety of the aircraft doesn't bother me, but the cabin crew have no idea about safety at all. And I mean,
No, they just go through the motions, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're very pleasant. They're doing good PR. But the chap sold a smoothie. I remember it quite clearly. A smoothie to the couple sitting next to me, and they offered they required some change, and he couldn't figure out what the change was. And I thought, Jesus, I hope this bloody plane doesn't go down, because this guy had been totally useless.
Well, yeah, because computers do everything for people these days, and they stop using their own mind. So you lose brain cells.
Yeah. People can't can't add up, or subtract. They can't do simple things, which
No.
Mark Maybe says exactly that. I mean, he shows people a fountain pen, and they have no idea what it is, not at all. So I said, Sherman. Sorry.
Like when you go in, say for example, it's £8.20, and I give somebody like £10 and a 20p. You see them struggling to think, well, what do I give you back? And it's like, it's £2.
Yes.
You can really see them thinking, oh, I don't know how to compute this one. You've overpaid me.
That's right. Why didn't they give us a 20p extra? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just see them going, not sure how to do this one.
Yeah, but Dr. Mark and myself have talked about setting up a museum, a small museum, with things that are normal to us, but not to the modern generation, like a fountain pen. An abacus totally throws them. They have no idea what that is. And a blotter, is blotting paper on a roller. That's
one of my favorite video on YouTube that I saw was two teenagers. Do you remember the old telephones where you used to dial and do it? You have to remember the number, and you have to remember where you've got to. And they were given this phone, and they said, this is a telephone, and they hadn't got a clue how to make this phone work at all.
Yeah, no, I've seen something similar too. Yeah, I mean, actually, those sort of phones were pretty innovative, even when I was young. So it shows how far we've come in 70 years.
Yeah.
All the changes that have been made. As you know, well, because you look after me to some extent, is I collect model trains and things. And even I have my memory stirred if I order a model single-decker bus. Oh God, yes, I remember now. This is what they look like. But your mind actually blots out any memory until you actually see the facsimile of it, the image of it.
And no, there's certain things that we just forget that we used to have, and and I think, technology's moved quite a lot just in 10, 20 years. It's moved massively. Morning.
One thing that I found rather sad, and I can't remember why, but we had somebody on, and they said they'd just come in from bell ringing, and they said it's dying out because they, as youngsters, don't find bell ringing a challenge anymore because it's not electronic. Isn't that sad?
Probably old-fashioned. If we say to their mates that they've been bell ringing, they'll be ostracised.
Yeah, but what I find sad, Susie, is not so much that they're not intrigued by bell ringing, but bell ringing is turn again, Dick Whittington. It was a time-honored commitment by people from the community for since about 1300, and now is just in the last 20 years we've started to lose both interest and lose the skill, and I find that very sad.
Yeah, I think it's, you say, like, the skills that are being lost and being replaced by technology. And I think the other day I didn't have my phone, and I was in such a panic because my whole life's in my phone, and I don't want my whole life to be in the phone. I don't want to be dependent on this little machine that we're being made so dependent on.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where the importance of storytelling is so important, is to be able to tell a story. There is actually in Sussex a little circle of professional storytellers. There's a family that, because I'm so immobile now, I haven't seen for a little while, but they're a very talented family. The eldest daughter sings with her husband in a duo, and they are called Dandelion Charm. The next daughter is an opera singer. The younger one is a storyteller, and she tells stories professionally. There are 2 or 3 people that I've discovered I know who do the same thing. So at least that skill is alive and kicking. But there are so many skills, verbal skills, and communication skills that are we're losing.
I'm going to keep moving. Yeah, exactly. I'm just literally thinking. I was sitting in a lovely national country park, and I thought I'd go to find somewhere peaceful so I could join you this morning on the show. And all I can hear is traffic going over the A21. The train's just gone behind my head, drowning out the lovely, beautiful nature.
Yes, although we can hear the birds chirping.
Yeah, so many lovely birds singing today, but the train's just gone past my head. So I think trying to find somewhere quiet and peaceful these days is very, very difficult.
Yes.
So
I mean, actually, a colleague of mine who now lives in France, but was my boss at Reuters, actually, and then went as a Moscow correspondent or bureau chief, actually, for Reuters, and that's how I ended up in Moscow. Starting up Reuters, Russia Today television, and he, with some Russians and some scientists, tried hard to get a theme park to make people aware of sound pollution, noise pollution, which some scientists think is more dangerous than air pollution. And they scoured the country to try and find a council in this country to support them. And could they? No. People were so taken up with the minutiae of local governance, they couldn't actually see the importance and what they were being offered. Because this theme park was fascinating. It started off in a chamber where what the skies would be like and what the noise would be like at the time of the dinosaurs, right through to you came out at the other end, open up a door onto a busy London street, and it took you through these phases. Anyway, I don't want to labour the fact that they couldn't find any council in Britain to give them support. I mean, what they wanted was a suitable piece of land.
Wow, well, that's a real shame, isn't it? Because I
Yeah.
love silence, and I can't find silence. There is no, and to know what it would have been like without the not, even now I can still hear the A21 and the rush of traffic whilst in a beautiful spot. And to know what this might have sounded like, hundreds of years ago when there was no roads and no traffic and no trains and no planes.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I was privileged because I lived for the last 5 years of my tenure in Northern Ireland. I lived on a farm. We lived on a farm right in the middle of the County Down countryside. Now, an awful lot of people who were Brits wouldn't live like that. But as you know, I skirt danger all the time. And there was absolutely no light pollution, no sound pollution. It was absolute magic. And on a cloudless night, particularly with a full moon, you could walk out into the yard and be surrounded by, well, you were vaguely aware of the beauty of the countryside, but total, utter silence and absolutely pure vision. It was remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
I'm sure. I think the only place I can probably relate to that is when I was in South America for 3 months, and it was just mind blowing. And I did the Inca Trail. So when you're out on the mountains at night and you see the skies and you're closer to space, it's just it makes you feel so insignificant on this earth.
Yes, I agree.
The power and the beauty.
Yeah. The other similar experience that I had that I'll always remember is being in middle northern Nigeria, and where the only light it comes from generators, and the generators are confined to the main street, and sitting having a beer in a Muslim Sharia law place, having a beer. Guess where? In the police sergeant, in the police officer's mess.
The irony.
Yes, but it just so happened to be a night when there was a thunderstorm, and quite often in Africa, the thunderstorms, the lightning goes from cloud to cloud. It doesn't go to the ground, and
Wow.
it's an absolutely stupendous sight because all you hear is the thunder and the crack of the lightning, and everything else is total silence. Yeah.
Wow.
But I agree with you. Silence is absolutely wonderful.
It's finding it is the difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't think where you would find that sort of silence in this country. I suppose really there are areas in the Lake District and in Scotland and so on, but not readily available.
No, I went for a walk a few weeks ago. I went up onto the Downs, but I had to take the weird thing, I had to take an important phone call. And I was thinking, I need to find somewhere where I can just be quiet, be still, and no interruptions. And I thought, I don't know where to go. So I thought, well, I'll go and sit on the Downs. And at least 4 people found me. And I was like, I can't even go and sit on the Downs to find peace. To have a private phone call.
I mean, I can't walk anymore, as you know, so I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But at one time, I used to walk across the Downs from Lewis to Glynde, because there was a marvellous pub there, which isn't a pub anymore, the Trevor Arms. And on a Sunday morning, it was absolutely marvellous. And we did it as a group normally, but just once in a while in the winter, I would actually do it on my own. And you'd get up on the Downs and enter a mist. And you could swear that you were at the end of the earth. The only thing that disturb you is suddenly a sheep would come emerging from the fog and scare the hell out of you.
So did you do Mount Caburn? Did you climb Mount Caburn?
Yes, in fact, it doesn't take you the route. The public path doesn't take you onto Caburn, but you can actually go onto it from. You can diverge from the route, but it goes over more or less the peak of the downs before you start to go down into the village of Glynde.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there.
Yeah, it is. In fact, on a sunny day, there are points where you can't see any human habitation at all, and you could swear that you are at the end of the earth.
Wow.
And it's a marvelous feeling, yeah.
I've
you're
yet to
quite a
found it.
rambler.
Sorry?
You're quite a rambler. You walk a lot.
I missed that. Morning. I'm company.
I said you walk a lot.
Yeah, I don't walk as much as I'd like to. I seem to be flying around, being very busy at the minute. So I'd like to walk more. So I thought it'd be quite nice this morning to just come and have a walk. We just had some doggy company there. There's Teddy, here's my friend. But yes, I do like to walk. I think it's a good therapy, and it's, you can switch off and enjoy nature, which I think a lot of people forget to enjoy these days, and look at the birds and just hear the birds singing. I've got birds nesting in my chimney at the moment, so I can sit in my front room and listen to the babies chirping down the chimney.
When we first started Mirador, which was about 2015, that it got any purchase, because, believe it or not, until then you couldn't broadcast over phones. But I used to go down to the Priory at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer, and the only living or visible beings were the rabbits. And it was wonderful to have a little chat to the rabbits, and the monks. But the monks would only show themselves to certain people, and they got used to me going there early in the morning, so that they would chat to me. I had marvelous chats to the Priory's monks.
Oh, really? And are there still monks there now?
No.
Hmm?
No.
What? No.
But the ghosts only allow themselves to be seen by certain people.
Oh, I'm still on holiday mode. You got me there. Oh,
but it was very quiet and very isolated, and in fact, the people who built the Priory were quite clever, because they had out churches outside Lewes, one being in New Haven, and it's in direct line of sight of the Priory, so they could actually see the Priory was their mother, building, and these churches were sort of in direct line of sight, so that they had a feeling of being part of the Priory.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and they're lovely little churches because they are pre-Norman.
Right. And can you go to visit the Priory?
Yes. I mean, there's only a shell left now, because Henry VIII had it pulled down. But the foundations are there, and you get a very clear picture of what it was like. And the main church was almost as big as Westminster Abbey. It was huge.
Wow.
And it said, if you want a comparison, if you go to the church, the cathedral in Chichester, that it was at least that big, and that's pretty big.
Yeah, very big.
So
I'll have to
it's
go and have a visit.
Yes, I think actually everybody should, because you get some idea of. I mean, it dominated the town, and the fight for dominance of governance was quite interesting too, because there is documented the town's stewards, men who represented the Varennes and the ruling lords, and the priors men. In other words, the armed monks, and they met in a pub one night by accident, and there was a right dust up. I mean, it was a pub fight to end all pub fights, apparently.
So I grew up next to a convent. So massive big convent, and they had a priest's hidey hole in there. And
yes.
there was this underground, there were secret tunnels that led underground to another convent or a priory, so that they could escape or go into hiding should they need to go into hiding. And I've been in the priest's hidey hole, and they've got it was just incredible to think back in that time that would have been hiding the priests.
Yes.
And it was like a cut out wooden panel in the convent. So very, very interesting sort of history, really, when you think about, going back through all the religious changes and persecution. And part of this underground tunnel went through our garden, but that is now all sealed off because it would have been incredibly dangerous now. But it's interesting that all these priests and nuns running around secret corridors under the ground.
Yes. Well, of course, Lewes is riddled with underground tunnels. Some of them were legitimate because Lewes was at one stage a port. So they were to move goods, but mostly for smugglers. But I am told that the Greyfriars, of which there is nothing extant above ground except Stephen Catlin's secret garden, is riddled with medieval tunnels and rooms and so on. So a lot took place in secret. There is just no more than, I don't know, half a mile from here. There is a house called Antioch House in what's known as the bottleneck area of Lewes, and it's not very far from the castle. And I've actually been into the tunnel, which is now blocked off. But that tunnel is said to go up to the. It is said to go up to the castle, and the story is told, which I'm sure is apocryphal because it doesn't fit historically. Is that King Charles in the English Civil War hid in our castle, and when the Cromwell's men came looking for him, they would knock on the castle door and they would say, "Hello, is the king here?" And they say, "No." But they'd been alerted to his approach, so he scuttled down the tunnel and was sitting in Antioch House.
I'd love to go back and just to be like a casual observer and to sort of see these things happening and then come back. Not sure I'd want to stay there in the Civil War.
Yeah, well, I have to retrieve it because you get diverted running a television station day in, day out. But I went when I was experimenting with artificial intelligence. I got one of them, Chat GP, I think it's called, and it's remarkable because it talks to you like a human being. I say, "Are you able to perform such and such stuff?" "Of course I am. Would you like me to?" So I got it to actually create a pub in 800 AD, which is when Lewis was more or less founded by Alfred the Great. And it actually created a pub for me and named it, named the landlord, and so on. And it was fascinating. And I was going to find pictures for it, and I never got around to it. I must go back and look for it.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes, but I mean, they do use all the research that is available.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
How is
Susie,
AI?
it's now 9 o'clock.
Yeah, time for me to
I'll
say
let you go. Great to see you. I'll see you later.
yes. I will. Once I pick my daughter up, I shall head down to Lewis once I've dropped her back off at home. So I'll be roughly around 12:30ish.
Okay. Well,
So hopefully we'll see each other. We need to catch up.
Yes, we do. Yes, important things to talk about. Otherwise,
Yes.
I'm going to collapse.
Well, lovely to have been able to join you this morning. I've missed being here.
What a great idea! You mustn't not join us because you think is the phone isn't good enough. It is. The picture is good. There is no problem with the sound at all. We get slightly intermittent, but that's okay. So God bless you. We'll see you any other.
We'll see you
day
later on.
Care to join
Okay.
us? Yeah.
Bye for
Okay,
now.
darling. Right,
Bye. See you later.
Okay. There we go. That's Susie and Susie Cooper. And she's a regular for us. She's been on holiday, and I'm glad that she's back today. And I sent her an invitation, and she picked up the ball and ran with it. Let me do what I normally do at this hour, in the hope that perhaps we'll get Dr. Mark on deck. But let's look at the front pages. The Daily Mail. Rishi warns the UK is entering a dangerous era. Is in a landmark speech to be made today, he's going to spell out the challenges of AI, migration, and authoritarian states, and why Labour would leave us vulnerable. Well, forget the Labour leaving us vulnerable bit. Is pulling together all the threats of AI. Yes, at least there are some benefits there. Migration, which is now becoming where we're just becoming a dormitory for people who are fed up with their life at home. And authoritarian states is Netanyahu, the head of Hamas, Russia, China, Iran, all are making the world very unstable. And North Korea, of course, is any one of those people are just daft enough to actually push the button, or nowadays it just pull the trigger, because we got nuclear weapons that will do anything. It's fly 1,000 miles with a nuclear warhead. So, yes, we are entering a dangerous era. Migration is we're bulging at the seams. and the argument that well, we can't get the help, can't get the staff, as they say. Well, that's because we've grown soft and sassy, and perhaps what is going to be shocking to the modern generation workforce is that they may have to go back to work. Things may not be, we may have gone through a golden era, and things may not be as easy to get hold of as they have been. And I think that we in for a shock. What does the Daily Mail, the number of the papers, focus on a speech due to be given by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak today? The Mail says he will warn that the UK is at a crossroads ahead of the next general election and a defining period for the West. Elsewhere, an image of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on a visit to Nigeria is accompanied by the question, Harry who? And a follow-up to say the country has gone mad for Meghan. Poor old Harry, having to take a back seat. Well, although I've spent time in Nigeria, I like the Nigerians very much, but they do tend to go overboard for royalty and the like. So they paid no attention whatsoever to the spat that's going on in the royal family. The Times. The banner headline is Autocratic States Pose the Biggest Threat Since Cold War, warns Premier Sunak. But UK sick note culture is fueled by obesity crisis, says the Times. So Sunak will say in his speech that more will change in the next 5 years than in the last 30. There will be a focus on the threat that colluding authoritarian states pose for the UK. The paper also goes big on a study which suggests that obese people are up to twice as likely to take time off work, fueling a worklessness crisis that is stifling Britain's economic growth. The Daily Telegraph, Prime Minister, Britain safer under Tories for the dangerous years ahead. Britain is safer under the Tories for dangerous years ahead is the Daily Telegraph's take on what the Prime Minister expected to say, adding that the speech will see Mr. Sunak kickstart his election campaign. There is also more coverage of the research around obese workers, with the paper citing experts as saying Britain's record was among the worst of 28 countries, which sit with 6 in 10 adults overweight or obese. I think I'm probably overweight. Don't think I'm obese. Well, officially I am. Clinically I am. But I'm not huge. Not huge, paddling huge. Daily Express. Prime Minister's bold vision for stark choices facing Britain. The Prime Minister has a bold vision for the country, as commented by the Daily Express, which says the speech will see Mr. Sunak speak of bold ideas and huge opportunities for British families. There is also a large image of Floella Benjamin smiling on the front page. The children's television presenter and Liberal Democrat peer won the prestigious fellowship at the BAFTA TV Awards on last night. The Mirror. Get your house in order. The Daily Mirror's coverage of Mr. Sunak is not about his expected speech, but an investigation carried out by the paper which suggests 4 Tory MPs have declined to reveal whether they paid tax on a total £5 million from the sale of public-funded homes. The paper tells the Prime Minister it is time to get your house in order, following the row over whether Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner paid the right amount of tax on the 2015 sale of her council house. She denies any wrongdoing. The fact of the matter is the Mirror has got hold of the wrong end of the stick. It is not whether it is Labour did it, so Conservatives shouldn't do it, vice versa. It's, are they all out of order? Is it wrong to make money this way? And of course, in some circles, it would be a perfectly legitimate business opportunity. In others, it would be profiteering. But whichever it is that is the sin. Not being Conservative or being Labour. If only they would drop. And actually, the Mirror as a newspaper is once a respectable newspaper is not very respectable anymore. And I'm not talking about whether it fits in with the social order. You're just talking about whether, in fact, it's a good newspaper. Get your house in order. Shouldn't be asking things like that. By all means, report on Tory MPs making money. If that's the case, I'm sure they're all up to it. So it's the practice that should stop for everybody, not Tory, Lib Dem, Labour. The I. Rise in 40-year mortgages as millions face repayments into retirement. Staying on the theme of politics, the I cites new data as revealing more than 1 million people have taken out mortgages in the past 3 years, which will last into their last 60s. A former pensions minister tells the paper borrowers are at risk of poverty in old age. Elsewhere, there is another spot to the BAFTA TV Awards. The BBC's Happy Valley and Netflix's Top Boy triumphed after winning 2 awards each, the I says. What were they? Happy Valley and Top Boy. I don't know either of them, but they've won top awards, so they must be good, mustn't they? Haha, yes. Oh, yes. Let's see, The Guardian. Union boss says Elphick is incompatible with Labour. Well, I think everybody would go along with that right now. An interview with the president of the Trade Union Congress leads The Guardian with Matt Rack telling the paper that new Labour MP Natalie Elphick is support for anti-strike laws should be incompatible with the party whip. There is also an image of Manchester United's world women's football club fans jubilant as the team picked up their first Women's FA Cup trophy on Sunday, beating Tottenham Hotspur 4-0. I watched that. It wasn't a bad game, actually. I'm getting quite into the ladies' sport. The commentators are a bit different. They need to be trained. Right, the Financial Times, Beijing fires starting gun on $140 billion. debt sale aimed at boosting the economy. A report about the war in Ukraine sits atop the Financial Times, with Russian forces said to be pushing farther into the Kharkiv region. The business paper quotes a top Ukrainian military commander as saying the situation in the region has significantly worsened. Metro, blood victims treated like lab chimps. The Metro reports on claims that victims of the contaminated blood scandal, where more than 30,000 people in the UK were infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being well. The Metro reports on claims that victims of the contaminated blood scandal, where more than 30,000 people in the UK were infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products during the 1970s and 1980s, were compared by experts to laboratory chimpanzees. Oh, after all that, how are we doing with the Daily Star? Ooh. Storms, then 24 centigrade, it says. Summer like it hot. It's play on words. And it's got its favourite seagulls licking chips and drinking lager. Oh, summer like it hot is the Daily Star's main headline, with a report about this week's weather. There will be storms in the UK, the paper warns, but then scorching temperatures of up to 24 centigrade. So better get your shorts out, those people who have legs that are able to take shorts. Let's see if I'm still with you. Yes, I'm still with you. I'm still with you. Me and my doppelganger. Yes. As you can see, the background of the pub, and I haven't had a chance to check with the Chief of Staff to see how the quiz went on Sunday night, because the chef was ill, so there was no Sunday lunch. Whether, in fact, that affected the quiz or not, I'm not sure. But certainly the Sunday lunch that we always plug, because it is really a good value for money and it's tasty, was not on offer. And the Chief of Staff, Declan, he was very good in terms of letting everybody know that there wasn't a Sunday lunch, but whether in fact it impacted the quiz night, which started at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, or not, I have no idea. So I shall find out in a little while, and I'll report back to you. But it'll be next month now. It'll be in June, the second Sunday in June, that the next quiz will be ready to be enjoyed. £2, 8 o'clock, the second Sunday in each month at 8 o'clock. And yes, a very enjoyable evening, Oh, well, this rabbiting on for a couple of hours first thing in the morning, particularly when you've had a bad night with your Parkinson's, is a bit tiring. So forgive me if I yawn just a little. But yawn I will. And I hope that you found the little chat between Susie and myself and Philip and myself of interest, and taking us out of our own backyard and into somebody else's backyard. One was in Tunbridge, and the other in Arundel. Rather pleasant. Let's check on the official weather, shall we? Yes, here we are. Sunny intervals and a gentle breeze. 18 degrees today, and it's starting off at 13, which is quite warm. It's going to be overcast for most of the morning, but at 1 o'clock the sun will break through, and we will have a scattered cloud, but zero possibility of rain today, which is a bit. That's hard to believe at the moment because it is very dour outside, but not cold. So you can afford to go without your overcoat on this particular morning. Although you may want to wrap up against rain, but it is not likely, according to the weather forecast. Tuesday is when the rain returns, but back to scattered showers and sunshine on Wednesday, scattered showers and sunshine at Thursday, and Friday. Friday is rain. Oh, yes, rain. And Saturday, rain. And Sunday, scattered showers again. And we start to creep up to 18 again. And so far, it looks as if it's going to be 18 degrees all the way through next week. Ending on Thursday with full sunshine. Oh, yes, indeed. Okay. Okie dokie. I think that we've had a pretty full morning so far. I hope that we're going to have either Mark, maybe, or Harry Atherton will not be here, or not anticipated, until 10 o'clock. And it is now 9:18. So we've got a little while yet. And what we'll do is we will see what videos we've got. Tell you what, I am going to look for episode 8 of I doubt if I stand much chance of finding it, because I haven't got I haven't got those files in. But let's we're going to keep looping these anyway. So let's go back to episode 1 of The Bloody Past of a Tiny Town and give you a little taster of what's in store.
I'm Keith Hayes, and you'll be sick and tired of my face by the time this series ends, but I hope you'll bear with me as I shuffle through the streets of this lovely town, pop in and out of its pubs, and tell you a story of its bloody past. In Saxon times, it was known as Lewes. The modern term for toilet might have come from it, I suppose. But the town became respectable and is now known as Lewes. Lewis, not Lewes. But its original name does come from Saxon times. And this pretty little town in East Sussex, nicely tucked under the shelter of the South Downs, has had this high street for longer than written records go back. Pretty normal sort of UK high street, really. Typical shops and stores each side of it. Looks just like High Street UK. High Street UK, from John O'Groats to Land's End, have all got a history. But this little stretch of road has a violent and bloody history. And that history reflects much of the history of the country itself. A pint pulled from a tap is the tipple of most Englishmen, I suspect. They sure tippled in Lewes in the past. This pub goes back to 1742. There's a list of the landlords to prove it. Today, sitting on the high street, it's one of the 16 pubs in a town of 16,000. 150 years ago, there were 63 pubs in Lewes and 18 breweries. And in those days, there were only 9,000 people.
Wow, what a tall tale. Yes, but true. And over the next few programmes,
I'm going to take a closer look at some of the bloodier and more sensational events that have occurred on this seemingly normal high street. But right now, I'm just going to paint a general picture of this tiny English town, before I get to the bloody and the exotic. The high street is dominated by a Norman castle. One of the oldest Norman castles in the country. It was built not long after the invasion of 1066. It housed the Norman garrison, who ensured the people living inside its walls were kept safe. Indeed, Lewes was a walled town, and there is brick-by-brick evidence of the 4 gates that gave entry to the town. By the way, Lewes isn't a corruption of Lou. It's the Saxon word for a hill. And if you thought that Lewes had lots of pubs, it has far more hilly roads. Far more even than the rest of the country, I think. The modern-day Lewes is well used by its people. Lots of shops, markets, and even tea rooms. It also has a lot of parades. At the end of the school year, a ceremony takes place called patina. All year long, pupils design and build exotic costumes ready to parade down the high street.
Raphael, I walked onto the high street in Lewes a couple of years ago to be greeted with a lot of children running around in funny costumes. What on earth is that all about?
It's called Moving on Parade, and it's something we started 16 years ago. It started from a wish of parents to bring more art into schools because they see how much schools struggle demands of the government, and they wanted to support the school in that. So we started something called Patina, which is Parents and Teachers in the Arts.
All right.
Moving on Parade celebrates the transition for primary to secondary education of all the children in Lewes District Council.
Very colourful costumes. How do you decide what the costumes are? You're the artistic director, so you better give me a good answer on this.
So every year we have a theme, and the theme this year is Wonders of Our World. Last year we asked the community to suggest different artists that they would like to see on the parade, and loads of suggestions came in, and we shortlisted the huge list into 16 schools, which was the amount of schools that took part last year. We had Frida Kahlo, and we had Picasso, and we had Van Gogh, and we have Giacometti, and we had Andy Warhol. So they doing illustrations and designs, and then the patina artists take all the children's idea and adapt it into a practical design that the children are actually able to make in a couple of days. We invite about 8 or 10 people from every school to come and learn the skills of the carnival costume, and they start to make the big make that the school is going to carry. And after that, the patina artists going into the school and work with the children on their individual costumes. We're trying to really do it as a enjoyment, getting people together. They're all going to meet in their secondary school later on. We're trying that they'll meet each other beforehand as well. So we're doing events all year round for the benefit of the whole community, not just for the year sixes.
You do other things. You said you go to the schools. What do you do in the schools?
So our next event is on the 22nd of April. It's called Dance Your Socks Off. And because the theme this year is Wonders of Our World, we thought it'll be really fun to have an evening of teaching flamenco, bhangra, and the sirtaki with world food. We're going to have sushi, we're going to have international cocktails, we're going to have professional dance callers who are going to teach the dance, and it's going to be a really fun event, and that's for children as well.
The cocktails. I told you Lewes is a drinking town.
Yeah, we're
Right.
pretty good at cocktails. Growing every year. So we making contact with our twin towns. We're making contact with Lewes in America. There's a group of them artists from Lewes in America coming to Lewes in June. We made contact with them. And what we would really like is to use this format in other places, because Lewes is the only place that we know of to celebrate their moving on from primary to secondary schools, and it's people that hear about it, they are impressed, and it will be really nice for other people, other children in other communities to do the same.
Yeah, I did realise it was unique to Lewes and a very unusual operation. Well, how do the children react to it? I mean, generally speaking, do you get great support from the kids?
Yes, we do, and because it's been going for so many years, it becomes a part of the cultural calendar of the town. So young children know that when they get to year 6, they'll do the moving on parade, and all the siblings did it, and they've seen the rest of the older ones doing it. So it's kind of something that they look forward to.
I'm known for wearing strange costumes. As you can see, my hats are still there in this episode, so I don't think I should be marching, but I most certainly will come to the cocktails.
Great.
Raffaello, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The adults have their turn, and on November the 5th, the biggest Guy Fawkes celebration anywhere in the world takes place. Exotic costumes, burning crosses, effigies stuffed with fireworks. Rousers, that is a banger to you and I, are tossed casually into the street. And almost every citizen of the town, old and young, takes part. There's a bit more to the bonfire celebration, though, than just the gunpowder plot. In 1553, Queen Mary was determined to bring Roman Catholicism back to England. Right here on the High Street, she burned 17 people at the stake who wouldn't convert. The dungeon, where they were held before being so horribly slaughtered, is still here, up these steps, being the last walk the condemned men would take. It was a horrible death. They were put into tar barrels, which were then set alight. Pretty bloody stuff. But we'll leave the high street for a few minutes, then we'll bring you more gore, blood and guts.
I think the government stinks. And I think the last government stank. And what's more, I think the government even before that stank. Whether I believe that or not is quite irrelevant. What is important is whether I can say it without being locked up by the King's men. It wasn't always so.
The rights enjoyed in a free democracy started right here. It was here, near to the high street, that blood was shed in the name of freedom. It was match of the day, the king versus the barons. King Henry III was roundly defeated at the Battle of Lewes, just on the edge of the town. Despite holding the castle, the king's men were put to the sword, and many were massacred in both the huge priory, which stood near the town, and right here in our bloody high street. Panicking soldiers were easy pickings for the pursuing forces of Simon de Montfort. The Battle of Lewes is said to be the first step towards democracy in this country. That was in 1243.
You say the Battle of Lewes to most people around this country now, they glance at you with vacant eyes. They don't know what it's about. What was it about?
Well, you're right. Most people here don't know about it. What happened was Simon de Montfort and his barons were arguing with the king and his men about representation in Parliament, whereas the king, the king just had all of his men and a lot of his French relatives in Parliament, and he was taxing the barons very heavily, and all of this money was going to the French relatives or going abroad, and the barons were not very happy about this. So they wanted at least half of the 24 men in Parliament to be elected barons. So, I mean, though it's not very democratic in the sense that we have it today, it's the start of that representation of a view that is not just the king's view on how things should be run. Simon de Montfort got to hear that the king was down at the Priory of St. Pancras. And why he was there was for the Feast of St. Pancras in the middle of May. And of course it was a big feast and people would come from all over the world, actually, or all over Europe to the feast. So he needed somewhere as big as the Priory to be able to feed all these people and entertain them for a few days. And that's why he was here. Simon de Montfort was up country in northern Sussex in some of his estates with his men, and he heard that the king was down here and he sent messengers. He sent bishops of Winchester and London down with money, with £30,000, which is a fortune in those days, to try and negotiate a settlement with the king. The king was a little bit reticent to go into war with Simon de Montfort because, yes, they were brother-in-laws and he was an old man. They were in their late 50s at the time. Not that that's old now, but it was then. But the king's brother, Richard of Alamein, also called King of the Romans, etc., he wanted war. And of course, Prince Edward, hothead, he definitely wanted war. So they settled, you know, the ransom money was sent back, and the envoys, the bishops were sent back, and so it was war the next day. They negotiated the Mise of Lewes, most of which was, you know, yes, we took this castle, well, we give you it back, and you give us this, and we'll ransom this man and that man for this man and that man, that kind of thing. But it also set down where the king would say, you know, 24 of the 24, we're going to have 12 elected barons, so that we're going to have the beginning of a parliamentary election. And Simon de Montfort made the king hand over his seals, which meant that the king had no power. So Simon de Montfort became the de facto king. It changed the king's complete and outright power. And Prince Edward then went on to, as king, ratify the clauses of the Magna Carta and the provisions of Oxford. And those began to change the king's power. And it also meant things like, if a woman died as a widow, her her dowry money was hers. It didn't need to be given over to her husband's family and sons and what
There's
have
a
you.
start of women's rights as well.
There you go.
My goodness
There
me.
you go. The Normans did it for us.
The man who gave the name to the House of Commons, and according to at least one historian, named America the United States, preached his heretical views in the town's pubs. Here we go again. Pubs in Lewes. You can't get away from them.
There's a tale handed down from Crown landlord to Crown landlord that Tom Paine was barred from drinking in that bar because he harassed and harangued the regulars to the point where they wouldn't drink anymore. They were fed up with Tom preaching the rights of man. So he walked across the street to the coaching inn, the White Hart.
Where a more lenient landlord turned a blind eye, or, a more likely, a deaf ear to the ravings of this revolutionary.
It seemed that he used to like to spend his social hours here and his active political discussion times here in volatile discussion with a group which I believe we thought was called the Headstrong Club, because it still meets today and they call it the Headstrong Club today. But I gather from a local historian that it was called the White Hart Dining Club. And Thomas Paine, up in our sheriff's room, the oak-panelled function room, basically plotted the American Revolution and for a struggle for independence, which resulted in the final Declaration of Independence, an authenticated copy of which we have in the sheriff's room, and he was credited with originating that, and in turn he dubbed the White Hart Hotel as the cradle of American independence.
He had some remarkable phrases, didn't he? I mean, according to Bill Bryson, he coined the first time the phrase the House of Commons, and also Bryson says that he coined the phrase the United States. So now the White Hart goes down in history as the cradle of independence. It's wonderful. But whoever the landlord was at the time embraced him and said, "Come on in, we'd love to hear you talk."
It certainly wasn't me. No, you're right. And yes, I think probably as any hotelier, always keen for a little bit of business, and it developed into quite an active dining club, I gather, because they had their volatile political discussions over dinner.
No record of you throwing him out of the hotel.
No, but I have to say that during the times that they have met here recently, we've had some very interesting volatile speakers, lots of celebrities, actors, and I remember Tony Benn's voice drilling through the sheriff's room door. It said, I ought not say too much, but it said that a lot of decisions are made here after the council chambers has closed. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think Lewes has embraced Thomas Paine very well. I'm very proud of him because he lived just up the road in the Bull Inn, and of course it was a very easy little trot, and even after he had imbibed, he wouldn't have far to go.
So our Tom, getting nowhere at home, he worked briefly as a customs officer in this house here, married the boss's daughter in the church here, within the town's walls, then took off to America.
In Lewes, he was ranting. In the colonies, he was making sense.
He preached revolution, and revolution was what he got. The American colonies broke away to form a new country, the United States. There are many more buildings that either face or back onto the high street. Lewes Prison is a few hundred yards up the road. It has held many famous people, including pop star Mick Jagger. Jagger famously talked his way to a prison phone, called the White Hart Hotel, and ordered a takeaway, which was duly delivered. Tucked away behind these buildings was a naval prison. 250 Russian prisoners captured in a naval battle in the Crimea War were incarcerated here in 1854. Life was harsh for the ratings. but the officers roamed the town at will, socializing with the locals and dining at the tables of the high and the mighty in Lewes. 17 of the ratings died while in prison, and a monument to them stands in the graveyard of a local church. This impressive structure was built by Tsar Alexander II, and its upkeep is still paid for by the Russian embassy in London. There are many other events that make the High Street interesting. The days of great circuses parading their animals. The Prince Regent winning a bet, driving a coach and four down the cobbled street. It's a wonder he didn't break his neck. So today I've taken a snapshot look at Lewes High Street. High Street UK. Every high street has a history. And there are thousands of high streets across the country. And this is just one of them. More high street tales tomorrow. Meanwhile, where's that pint?
Well, episode 1, and I must have seen that 20 or 30 times, and every time I watch it I learn something new, something that I'd either forgotten or missed the first time around. So I hope that you find it useful. Tomorrow we'll show episode 8 tomorrow, or a little later in the week, but another interesting historical raconteur tomorrow is Kit Wood, veteran schoolmaster at Lewes Old Grammar School, Logs as it's affectionately known. And a very knowledgeable historian about the background to this town and the environment of Sussex generally, which, because of its situation, is very historic. More things have happened here. Key to British history, and you can break you can shake a stick at. But one of the interesting things about that first episode is that it spends a little bit of time on the Battle of Lewes. And this past weekend was the anniversary of the Battle of Lewes, which took place in 1264 between the upstart barons of Simon de Montfort and Henry IV. Some 50 years after Magna Carta. The Battle of Lewes should be equal, if not more significant, than the events building up to Magna Carta. Because whereas Magna Carta was a statement that altered absolutely nothing, because the first King John, and then King Henry, blithely went on their merry way, behaving much as they did before. The Battle of Lewes is considered by most key historians to be the true starting point of English democracy. The king was still taxing everybody to the hilt, still spending it, first of all, on looking after his relatives, his Norman relatives, not English. His own way of life, his own backyard, as it were. And most certainly not on anybody outside the royal family. The king still, despite Magna Carta, believed he ruled from the divine right of kings. In other words, God had selected him to be king, and that he was only answerable to God. It was easy to be. You made up your mind about whatever rules you wanted to apply. But de Montfort and his fellow knights, barons, who were funding this lifestyle, and I've seen the food order for just one banquet. You didn't order a dozen steaks. You ordered a dozen oxen, half a dozen pigs, a few dozen chickens and pheasants, and out of your own park, a deer or two. And that was just one banquet. So Simon, whose pocket was being picked, as it were, who was helping to pay for this wanton way of life, said to the king, "Here, you stop this, or we're going to take matters into our own hands." And the king, believing that God was on his side in anything that he did, told Simon to get stuffed. So Simon marched on Lewes, where the king was celebrating yet another feast, the feast of St. Pancras at the Priory. And they set to and had a running battle, which ultimately Simon and the barons won, and demanded and got concessions from the king, which gave them seats in Parliament and various other concessions before Simon, who had got the Great Seal, the monarch's Great Seal, which made him king, handed it back. But right across from where I'm sitting, there is a little strip of green. Well preserved, rather pleasant actually. A couple of oak trees surrounding it, a brick wall protecting it. Not a large plot of land, but on it at the time stood a windmill. And when it was obvious that the king had lost the battle, his followers fled, because thousands and thousands and thousands of men died on that weekend's battle of post Magna Carta, on that Battle of Lewes Day. And they were remembered yesterday, starting more or less at a site which I'm looking at now, where the windmill stood. And I would show you the site, because it's very uninspiring, actually. It's just this patch of green, as most sites are. But I can't, because we have neighbours who are sensitive to television cameras, and that's understandable. So we can't show you without setting up rather more complicated way than we're capable of with just our limited resources. But the one of the king's relatives, fleeing from the battlefield, took shelter in the windmill that stood on that side to stop him being made mincemeat of by the king's soldiers. Made mincemeat of by the baron's soldiers, and with his own side in hot retreat. And they dress up in chainmail and with swords and shields and so on, have little spats, little skirmishes in the street. And all in all, it's quite an interesting ceremony. They march on down the street to the castle, which the king occupied, and another mock battle takes place. Presaging a number of occasions, reenactments and so on across the weekend to commemorate this most important battle in the fight for freedom of speech, the Battle of Lewes, 1264. Okay. Okay. It's coming up to 10 o'clock. We should be hearing from Harry in a few minutes. And let's just remember the Battle of Lewes, 1264. And it was also the start of the quest for American independence with Tom Paine. 500 years later, espousing the cause of the rights of man, which made him fall out with the king, eventually get charged with treason, skipping to France and helping the French revolutionaries, falling foul of Robespierre and disappearing to what he named the United States. So important events in the scheme of things that unfold in Lewes. We'll just we'll give it a couple more minutes because Harry tends to be bang on time. We'll wait patiently and see if he appears. We've already had wisdom of Susie and the insight of Philip and mutterings from me. And let's just remind ourselves of the newspapers and the news headlines. A number of the front pages feature Rishi Sunak's speech due to take place today. The Daily Telegraph focuses on the Prime Minister's claim that as the world enters one of its most dangerous eras, Britain will be safer. Yeah, feel better. The paper says Mr. Sunak will highlight dividing lines between the two parties, including what he sees as Labour's failure to match his commitments to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. The Times concentrates on Mr. Sunak's warning about autocratic states. He is expected to say collusion between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran poses the most dangerous threat since the end of the Cold War, and the West must learn The Times concentrates on Mr. Sunak's warning about autocratic states. He is expected to say collusion between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran poses the most dangerous threat since the end of the Cold War, and the West must face up to these adversaries. And the Daily Mail says it will be a landmark speech highlighting the challenges of AI, migration, and authoritarian states. The Guardian carries a warning from England's former chief medical officer, Dame Sally Davis, that COVID-19 will look minor compared with increasingly drug-resistant superbugs. Dame Sally, who is now the UK's special envoy on antimicrobic resistances, says the issue is more acute than climate change. It would be a disastrous picture, she says, if the world fails to tackle the problem. The paper says drug-resistant infections already kill at least 1.2 million people a year. Right, I think that I heard a pop. Let's see. I think that, yes, we've got Mr. Harry Atherton. Hello, Harry.
Good morning, Keith. Good morning. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late because I've just had to write a tribute to a delightful elderly English gentleman who passed away, part of our little English community here in Normandy, who passed away last week. And after a very distinguished career in teaching, which saw him end up as head of the English department at the College Le Rosey in Switzerland, where he taught many of today's world leaders when they were sons of elite international families. And he passed away. He a fellow Yorkshireman. He was born in Hull and named Chris Holliday. And he spent his final years here in Domfront-Poiré in Normandy with his little dog, also Yorkshire, the Yorkshire Terrier, delightful little guy called Einstein. And they both died within a short time of each other at the same age. If you take an age of a dog and the age of a human, they both died at the same age. So it's rather a symbolic loss to us, as part of our little community here. And a lovely guy, very gentle man, as I say, very distinguished career, and we'll miss him. So I wrote a tribute for the local paper, and I was trying to get it off to them before joining you this morning, and I managed to bugger up my computer. I managed to wipe it out after I. So I've luckily I have a hard copy, so I shall have to type it all out again. Or I don't know quite how to do it. People of my vintage and I suppose our vintage, I should say, we're not the world's most skilled experts in modern technology. And,
no, that's right, Harry. I've done that many a time myself.
Oh gosh, and it's amazing, quite amazing how I can make a mess of the computer. Yes.
It's all those buttons that you press. You're only going to press the wrong one, and suddenly you're left with a blank page.
Well, this is it. This is what I've got. So I can see the text on my screen, but when I call it up, there's a blank page, and I'm trying to figure out how to recover it. So
yes,
if any of our myriad viewers have got any thoughts about how to recover that, what we need is some young kid, a 12-year-old kid who probably runs technical circles around us. And
yes, you just say da, 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 and that's it. Done.
Absolutely. So I'm feeling particularly stupid this morning. So I don't know whether I should be able to contribute anything intelligent to.
Actually, it was a blue Monday from the very start this morning, because I started off at about 7:30 preparing the screen for our broadcast, and managed to push two wrong buttons, and I had to try and get stuff back also, and I actually managed to drop a little bit on the floor. And since I am virtually unable to move anymore, is picking stuff up off the floor which would take 2 seconds for somebody even like you. It takes me about 15 minutes.
I know the feeling, unfortunately, all too well. Yeah.
But Harry, as an ex-soldier, and having lived through what looks as if it's going to be considered a golden Elizabethan era, this morning in the headlines, we got British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying to the British people, wake up to the dangers that we face from AI, from immigration, and from rogue states, authoritarian regimes. And the latter particularly, what's your take on that? Is he just being political, or is it real?
Well, I think it's real in his mind, but you've got to enter the political mind. And I think Rishi Sunak has very quickly adapted the traits of political thought. They say things, but they don't do anything about it. The present Conservative Party mouths conservative thought, but doesn't follow up with the action. In fact, it has swung terribly to the left, I think, and way to the left of the Lib Dems. It's literally become a socialist party. And so what politicians say, they maybe feel they themselves mean it, but there's no substance behind it. Now, substance behind what a politician says is essentially the ability to put their thoughts into action. And they can only apply that action through the mechanisms available to them, and that is the civil service. And the civil service has become an unmanageable blob, itself, I think, riddled with largely left-wing ideas and woke thinking and equality and diversity and all of this nonsense. People on £100,000 a year salaries just to ensure that the right number of the right kinds of people achieves things, nothing to do with ability. And sometimes they're in direct opposition to what their political leaders are asking them to do. So we've come to a roadblock in a way as to how modern managerial skills in the political field can be effective. So Rishi Sunak saying these things, maybe he means them from the heart, but they've got little chance of being put into the action. And let's analyze them one by one. The first one, he said that, what was the first one, if I remember correctly? That
AI.
AI. Well, AI is everybody's talking about AI, but nobody's getting into a deep discussion about it. If we go back to the first that you and I really learned about AI, it was probably in Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, when HAL, the computer, became so clever that he actually took over directing the facility, and it was a sort of a forecast of the threat of the future. Now, is AI going to develop its own level of creative or even moral thinking that is superior to the human, or will AI only ever achieve what the human brain can create for it? Now, that's the big debate that should be going on. But have you seen anything about that in the newspapers, on television? If everybody talks about the wonderful things it's going to do, seeing the positive side. There's some people say yes, but there's a downside. It could be dangerous. But I don't see any public discussion by the people who have the answers, or may have the answers, the experts, on this issue. So we talk a lot about AI, but I mean, it's not the average guy in the well, somebody like you and me. What do we know about it?
Yes,
very little about it. Now, the second point was what the
immigration.
Immigration. Well, immigration is quite clearly diluting the ethnic makeup of the countries affected. We're not the only country. France is suffering from it as well. The United States is suffering from it. Germany already has 500,000 people who speak Turkish, 500,000 people, and vote as a bloc and vote according to what the Turkish government tells them to do. We've got Biden in the United States, where he talks about a two-state solution for Israel, the Israel-Palestine question. He's not talking about Israel and Palestine. He's talking about Minnesota and Michigan, which have high proportions of Muslim residents, that if he swings a little bit too much in favor of Israel, he's going to lose that vote. And so we get the impact where whole sections of towns in Britain and in France, there are even governance by Sharia law. So mass immigration has totally changed the ethnic mix of Britain, and take hundreds of thousands of people parading every weekend in London in favor of terrorism. I mean, where on earth does that come from? The impact that mass immigration has had on these countries, as I say, not only Britain, but many others, has changed them. And it's not changed them for the good, in my opinion, but no question about changing them. There's no changing back, and there's no effort made to limit immigration. It was seen as an economic help to build the market, but it's built it according to its lowest common denominator. And if you get into deep discussion about this, there's always people who disagree with you who try and tag you as a racist. I'm not a racist. I couldn't.
That's the frightening part. Yes.
Yeah.
Any sign of resistance is you are anti-Semitic or anti this or anti that.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
And so because that is all part of the woke problem, because it's used if you're not absolutely pure as the driven snow in debating these issues, your argument is denigrated by accusations of whatever, of bias, of being extreme right wing, or being racist, or whatever, or being ideologically captive to some strange philosophy. So it's very easy to not destroy the evidence, but to destroy the person giving. Hi, Declan. Hi there. God, I wish I was in your place today. I see those wonderful images of Yorkshire pudding and gravy and plates that pouring over. My goodness, it's the English pub. And actually, a rather brutal change of subject while Declan is here. I was reading an article a couple of days ago about the threat to the Yorkshire pub, not to the Yorkshire pub, to the pub business in England. And I remember when I wrote a story back at about 65 for some newspaper or other about that's right, I took a trip to England from Canada, wrote a story about the English pub. And at that time, the official government figures there were 88,000 pubs in Britain. There are now 38,000 pubs in Britain. I read in the newspaper yesterday, so well below half, and pubs closing at the rate of 2 a day during 1923. This article lamented the downfall of the British pub, but another article argued that it was a good thing because they were only removing the ones that weren't worthy of conducting business. So that the better pubs are surviving and doing well, and I'm sure the Black Horse is in that category.
Absolutely,
they're doing well, and it's the pubs that weren't up to snuff that are going by the board. I don't know what Declan's feelings would be about that, because I know a publican, he works his ass off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to stay afloat. It's a terribly hard job, and a few years ago, we bought an old castle and transformed it into a chateau hotel, which had its. So I've been in the hospitality business on the front line directly myself, and I know how what a toying and hard-working profession it is, and so I have the greatest respects for people who are in it. And but I don't know when I come to Britain and I go into these pubs, they seem to be all bustling and doing very well. Not more concentrated on food than they are on booze, I think, these days. Yeah. So I don't know what were Declan's views on that.
Well, I think the English pub has to be saved really, because it's lots are closing down, but some have closed down and reopened as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of the English culture, the English pub. And you go abroad and you see other countries try to mimic the English pub, and they don't really do it. There must be something to do with the air or the water around here. Pubs are pillar of the communities as well. And you get people that live by themselves come to the pub for company. People come to the pub for entertainment. People that work behind the bar or rely on the part-time jobs they get here or full-time jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to keep them going. And then you've got the breweries, microbreweries that rely on the pubs to sell their beers. So it's an important part of the culture, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the pubs are now owned by the brewery chains, I believe. Where the goal, of course, is to sell their beer, which contradicts in certain terms the fact that a high proportion of the revenue from the hospitality industry now comes from food as opposed to drink. I don't know what your proportion is, but the generally accepted proportion for the gastropub type of operation is 85% food and 15% drink.
See, it's the other way around for us. We sell a lot of traditional ale here, and our foods are probably about 20% of our take, or 80% is wet. So we rely on good beer here. But you need the kitchen to be open for people to come in as well. So that like my chef's off sick this week. And that will affect 20% of the trade for this week. So it is, whatever size the food is in the business, it's worth its weight in gold.
Sure.
You've got some pubs.
Yeah.
Some pubs just don't do food and rely on wet sales only, and they do struggle. Unless you've got like a Lansdowne down the road where they've got all the youngsters drinking down there and music blaring away.
Sure.
They've got a good drinking culture down there.
Well, this is it. The two factors in there. One is, of course, alcohol. The devil's brew and the impact it has on health and that sort of thing. But I go way deeper than that in my thinking. I try to think of what the British pub means in terms of being part of the fabric of the nation. And I always saw British pubs as a meeting place where the community came together. A very democratic institution, because you would find the postman drinking with the lawyer, with the solicitor, the lord of the manor having a beer with one of his staff, things like this. And I felt that it brought society together in a wonderful way. Is community spirit, and that appealed to my sense of what modern society should be about.
I've just given Keith the newspaper for today. When Keith's finished with that, later on today, about 3:30, 4 o'clock, all the tradesmen come in. And they sit around the table and they'll do the crossword and all the puzzles. And there'll be the tradesmen there, there'll be a postie there, there'll be me joining in with them as well. And everyone comes there just for that little bit of community. They'll be here for an hour, two, and then go home and have a dinner.
That's interesting, because you get your clientele in sections, as it were, in parts of the day. You'll get What the old retired old farts in the morning, do you? And and then after the busy day's work on the building sites, you'll get the workers coming in, and yeah, interesting, fascinating profession. Yeah.
Oh, hey, it's lovely, but I must go. I've got to talk about pubs. I've got to go and do my till quickly, and
okay.
my beer. I've got to go and do that.
Good.
Well, talking to you.
Here's strength to your bow, and
Thank you very much. All right, I'll see you later.
Okay, thanks, Declan.
So anyway, going back to the question of what Rishi Sunak was saying, what the third point was that that's right, rogue states, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, we've got the most ridiculous situation at the moment. I mean, we've got Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran about to set the world ablaze, we've got some people trying to resist this. Most notably at the moment, Israel trying to defend itself against the ongoing threat of Hamas, which even now is still bombarding in Israel every night with rockets. Can you imagine? It's still going on, and kids being killed in playgrounds in Israel. Now trying to defend themselves to eliminate Hamas, and you've got this incredibly I don't know, the word I think is incompetent, but it shouldn't get too far. This man Biden is now threatening to withhold arms from Israel, so he's supporting terrorist organizations. The United States is siding with the terrorist argument that Israel should not be allowed to defend itself. And the best form of defense is attack. And until Israel wipes out Hamas, they'll always be under threat. And so either we want to wipe out terrorism. So the Western world, I mean, Britain is disarmed completely so long ago that it couldn't even fight a 3-day war. And it's pathetic to think that in our lifetime, a once powerful nation has now become a third world country. But the United States, which is still highly powerful, very powerful militarily, is not even prepared to allow Ukraine on the one hand to fight the battle, a surrogate battle on its behalf, on Israel to fight a surrogate battle on its behalf in the Middle East by arming them. They only give Ukraine inadequate weaponry to keep a status quo in case they offend Russia. And they're now even going to deprive Israel of weaponry. These are two surrogate battles being fought on behalf of the United States, or freedom of the Western world, and our people can't even support that, even without flesh and blood.
Is your feeling, Harry, that Biden has lost the confidence of his own people?
Well, it's all a political game in many ways. When U.S. presidents, or for that matter, world leaders, make their decisions, they make it with two thoughts in mind. One is the first duty of a politician, and that's to get elected or re-elected. So essentially, they're playing to a home audience, or if they've reached a certain level and have achieved the pinnacle of their ambition, then they're looking for to establish their reputation in historical terms as how they will be seen afterwards. It's once you achieve the top of the pile, that's the only thing left to you is what your role will be, how it will be assessed in history. So what motivates these people to do whatever they do is not necessarily in the interest of their people. It's in their own interest or in the interest of their own image that they make these decisions. And very few people, there was an amazing novel that was written, many years ago now, 50 years ago, about a fictitious tribe where any member of the tribe could postulate to become the leader of the tribe and had absolute and supreme power to lead the tribe for good or for bad, hopefully for good, and take them to their deserved destiny. But at the end of the year, he was put to death by law. So he had power for 1 year only. And so if you put yourself forward to become leader, supreme leader, you knew that there was death at the end of it. Now, the moral message was, of course, that you took responsibility not only for your actions, but for assuming that role. It was an amazing book. And most of our politicians simply get, when they fail, they get promoted to the House of Lords. which, mind you, being put to death might be less painful.
Although I know it is the House of Lords, but isn't it remarkable how broadly David Cameron was considered a failed prime minister and is now not only in the House of Lords, but back in the cabinet?
Well, this is it. I mean, he's a bit of an oddball. I mean, probably a bright guy, nice enough guy, and all the rest of it. But, you know, it's not got the backbone and fiber that reflects Britain. I mean, many of these people, you know, people like Boris Johnson went a bit woke even in the end, and he got caught up with this young honey, forget her name, and who is full of all of the modern ideas and what have you. I mean, the Churchillian spirit that we all thought he embodied at the beginning was only skin deep, and great character. Love to meet him. Love to have a drink with him in the Black Horse in Lewis. But
yes,
not a leader. Rishi Sunak, neither, and absolutely even less Starmer. Can you imagine anything more bland than Starmer?
Yes.
So,
actually, about a year ago, Stanley Johnson, Boris's father, was in Lewis giving a talk about his latest book, and Liza Page, who is a bit poorly at the moment, unfortunately, but who has an hour on a Monday normally, and I took him to a sort of a late lunch, early dinner, and is a fascinating man. And Liza particularly was taken with him. But he seemed to me to embody rather more spirit, or you could see where Boris's spirit came from, but he didn't like the retiring type at all. He was going to keep up to the bitter end.
Yeah, absolutely. And he and Boris didn't always agree, I understand, on.
Oh no, there are some family disagreements.
Yeah. And,
but then again, at that level, Harry, is in the long run, those families, no matter what their disagreements, stick together. They understand very clearly the unity they must show to the outside world, and particularly to their enemies. Otherwise, if they're splintered, they've had it. That's when they really go to the war.
Well, you couldn't be more right. I mean, the whole principle of shared existence is that you should retain your individuality and each one accept the eccentricities of the other. Whereas now, if you're not ideologically aligned, that you become part of some amorphous mass, some almost cult religious belief, you're not accepted.
Yes,
I think it's wonderful that human beings should have shared friendships with diverse opinions, because some of my best pals around here, I'm even friends with a staunch socialist, and the trouble is he's brighter than I am, and he often beats me in debates about issues, and I creep home fully chastened with my tail between my legs.
Well, actually, if I can take your memory back to the Vancouver that we knew, which was governed by something called NPA, the Non-Partisan Association,
right?
Which was aldermen of no particular persuasion, although, of course, they all had their views. And one of the most colourful characters of that group was a chap called Harry Rankin, who was an absolute communist.
Yes, right, absolutely. I remember Harry, of course. Yeah, he was quite a guy. Yeah. And right as hell. So, no, diversity of opinion is very good and healthy. And it shouldn't allow people, it's much better to be with somebody who get a lively debate going than somebody who just completely agrees with you all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not a natural dynamic in human existence, because even in a couple, even in a marriage, there tends to be one person seeks to dominate the other, maybe not in total terms, but in individual aspects of their common life, of their shared life. And one has to respect where the skills and abilities of one member of a family exceed the others. Then you should be subordinate in that context. And I think in government, it applies to government. It applies to it applies to all collective activity, really. Everybody should bring their ideas into the mix, and hopefully the debate happens and the best results are produced at the end.
Yes, I mean, in theory, that the House of Lords should live by that mantra that you just outlined, but it doesn't. If it doesn't like something that the commoners have done, the MPs have done, is it actually moves en masse to try and block it and change it and stamp their own will on it. And I don't think that was the intent at all of the chamber.
No, I don't think it was. I think, and of course, the political parties stack the House of Lords with their own kind and raise them to the peerage in the hope that they will gain, numerical superiority in the Lords. But the idea of the Lords was the old-fashioned concept of the Senate, where they would evaluate the work that were done by the administrators, the government itself, and provide a series of checks and balances to see that wise decisions were taken to bring a wiser elder statesman kind of approach to issues. But no, they now make decisions among ideological lines.
Yes.
And if we go back far enough, I think we can even remember cases in the House of Commons where on both sides of the aisle, people would on both sides of the House, I should say, would get up and make speeches in defense of some proposition on the opposition side. They would not in a sense of betraying their own party, but if they felt a law was good and they felt that they could vote for it, they wouldn't simply vote against it because they were politically opposed. If they thought it was a good law, you would get people who would actually stand up and speak in favor of it from the opposition benches. Now that was and they weren't excluded from the party. They were allowed to do that. But now, if you don't toe the party line, and the same applies to the Conservatives as it does to Labour, the whip is withdrawn and they're out in the cold and no time flat, unless you're an ideological slave to the current line of thinking dictated by whom? By the Prime Minister and his immediate
I mean,
in the back room. Very often, government by people in the back room. There's almost a hidden form of power, I think, today in modern politics. It's not the people that you see on the stage; it's the people at the back and behind the stage that are governing things.
That's right. But even the people at the cutting edge, as it were, if they are thwarted, often look as if they are punishing whoever thwarts them, not sort of saying, okay, let's take a second look. There doesn't seem to be any room. It was seen as a weakness if you somebody says something that makes patent sense, but if you go along with it, that's a weakness. I mean, that seems to me to be farcical.
Absolutely, and I mean, we get this very entertaining Prime Minister's Questions time, where they try to strike sparks off each other, but it's more like a Punch and Judy show, where they try to put each other down. It's not. It doesn't seem to be very adult debate. The one, I suppose, at the committee stage, issues are debated, and in these committees are multi-faceted from a political makeup point of view. I suppose there's healthy debate that happens there, unless it's all again just under ideological lines. It's not good for a nation, and that's why I think our leaders, once they're elected to power, become not alienated but separated from the thought of their constituents, and which is the huge mistake that's been made by the Parliamentary Conservative Party, that they're no longer reflecting the wishes of the people who put them in place.
Yes, that's right.
And to a degree, you're going to have the same thing with Labour, with the socialists, but they're the adhesive that binds socialists together, though, mind you, is ideological, and so they'll probably be much more in tune with it's a much broader college, I think. The extreme parts of the Labour Party, the Corbyns and the rest of them, are much more to one end of the political spectrum than anything you see in the Conservative Party. You get centrists and right-wing thinkers and more social thinkers in the Conservative Party, but that band is fairly limited.
Yeah.
Whereas you do get the left-wing extreme of the Labour Party, of the Socialist Party, of the socialist way of thinking, is very extreme, and of course it slips over the edge into communism or totalitarianism.
Yes, it will be interesting to see whether history does repeat itself, and that in fact one of the new parties, the Reform Party or whatever, it manages to grab the mood of the people and do quite well. I mean, people say no, it'll never happen because the parties are so entrenched. But although my history of the time of the Whigs and the Tories is a bit sketchy, nonetheless, is my impression is that the Whigs actually went out of existence because exactly a similar situation, and the Tories did manage to grab the more or less the will of the people, limited though it was, of course, up until quite late in the 1900s. But nonetheless, it has happened in the past, in the recent past, reasonably recent past. Could it happen again?
Well, I think it will happen again, and it happens every time the pendulum swings too far right and too far left. The Conservative Party was founded in 1832. Disraeli represented a Reform Party as very much of a Richard Tice character at the time, and they built on that, and they built on the notion that society was evolving, whereby people should have a responsibility for their own destiny, to realize their own hopes and ambitions, and that is a natural spirit embodied in man. And so they harnessed that the will of the 19th century person to improve himself. Educational levels went up. People, and back in turn of the century, I'm talking about the 1800s here, Napoleonic times, if you will, if we're talking France, only about 10% of the people could read or write. But by the middle of the century, it reached such a high proportion that that modern popular literature came into being, and so that books could sell. Right, it wasn't just learned people who were reading books. The average people who sought to reach novels. The novel is a very recent feature of literary expression. It had begun fairly early in Spain. The novel back in the mid 1600s with Cervantes and people like that, and Don Alvarado de Guzman, but it wasn't the novel didn't really become as the popular novel that produced writers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and others. Was a very late comer on the scene and reflected people's ability to read and write. And so you got this resurgence of people taking responsibility for their individual destiny, which of course is the very basic idea behind conservatism. Labor is collectivism, where everybody will band together and the strength in unity. And if we all pull in the same direction, but then nobody, in a sense, takes the lead, or if they do, they're accused of all sorts of terrible things. We've got to be a man of the people, as it were. Well, our leaders, they're not there to be liked. They're there to be appreciated and to lead and to sometimes... Maggie Thatcher, for instance, love her or hate her, she didn't give a toot. She just had to do what she thought was good for the nation. And I'm sorry, in retrospect, what she did, she pulled the nation back together again. We've pulled it apart since, but in fact, her own people have pulled it apart because they all got jealous and started to fight amongst themselves, and which is again a fault, I think, that happens and throughout the Conservative Party existence.
Yes.
Internal warfare, but leaders are not there to be loved; they're there to be respected and to do a job.
Yes, I suppose every dynasty, if that's what it was, has somebody of envy who sounds very reasonable. I'm thinking of Michael Heseltine, whom I interviewed very shortly after returning from Canada. And a very plausible man, very charming, and so on and so forth. But as I went along and got further back into British politics and the British way of life, I realized just why he was like that. I mean, it was to give the impression that very much a man of the people, and what on earth were we doing with this dogmatic lady? Somebody is trying to join us, Harry. I'm happy to say. But the pop-up is a little dicey this morning for some reason. Philip had some problems joining, and I don't know who it is, so I can't resend the invitation. I suspect it may well be Mark Maybe, the good doctor, who might give us a very interesting slant on the educational side of things, if it is. Let's hope. But Heseltine, I always eventually thought of as the evil presence. It's Philip again. Good.
You you mentioned an evil presence, so I thought I'd turn up.
Well done.
Hello, Harry.
Harry is
Hello,
in full
Harry.
flow as usual.
I just got back from the delights of Bognor and Marks and Spencer's, so I thought I saw Harry was on show, so I thought I'd just hook up for the last 15 minutes or so. Are you well, Harry?
I'm very well. We've had our storms here this past 24 hours. The weather finally broke, and skies are a bit grey now after beautiful blue skies for a week or so. And so we got rained and hailed on yesterday, very, very heavily towards the end of the day. So it's again, we're getting back to normal now. So it should be good. It was an early summer, but it didn't last very long.
Nor here. It's been raining here on and off, but supposedly very wet later in the day and overnight. I've read that in parts of northern France, you could see the northern lights.
Oh yes, indeed.
Did you see them?
I didn't know. They didn't come into the pub. I was in. No, I'm joking, of course. I didn't see them. I have seen the Northern Lights on occasion, and once you've seen them, that's enough.
Yeah.
It's like it's a little bit like going to a rock show in Newcastle or somewhere. It's very colourful, but mind you, that opens a door, one of my favourite doors. And can you imagine that the storms on the sun affecting our situation here on Earth, how fragile our environment is really?
No, I entirely agree.
And all of this worry about trying to change this and change that, impoverish the world by trying to reduce temperature by 1 degree. And the latest thing I see is that as you're aware, the Antarctic is divided up by international treaty into different sections, and there's a part that is ascribed to Britain, the British Antarctic, where the Russians have found oil and gas, and in huge quantities, 50 times as much as the North Sea oil fields. Now, the agreement is international agreement that the Arctic circles and Antarctic in particular will not be exploited because they need to be kept in pristine state for environmental reasons, which I think we all agree with. But the worry is that the Russians will now start to exploit that. And even though they're signatories to the international agreement, any member country can withdraw if they want at any time. I think in 2028, there is going to be a meeting of all of the signatories for the Arctic agreements, and hopefully to renew the charter. But any member can drop out in the meantime. So we're going to get exploitation of the polar ice caps for mineral wealth, for mineral supplies, which again, the way my mind works, if there is oil and gas in the Arctic, it must mean that the polar ice caps did not exist at some time, that it was forest, that it was lush forest that finally died off and got buried in time and transformed into mineral and gas deposits.
That has to be a reason, yeah.
And so the idiocy of the ecological movement, we're all for the protection of the environment, all of us, I'm sure. but the ecological movement is a political movement. It's an extreme movement, I think, to deindustrialize the West at the expense of the advance of certain other countries, of which we know the names. I find it quite ridiculous. I mean, it's so unbelievable, and we've got bright people, so-called bright people, who agree with these campaigns for net zero. This awful woman Theresa May, who managed to screw up the system. She is still wittering on about it. I mean, and we're impoverishing ourselves and to what? To achieve something that a little bit of movement on the sun, a little bit of movement of time, a little bit of external influence. Our role is so minor; it can be barely be measured. And again, it's my opinion, but
you have made your views on the eco warriors and Theresa May very, very clear and it's your prerogative to so do. But on many occasions, you've also pointed out the loss of manufacturing and productivity in the UK that has been moved to reduce our net zero, reduce us towards net zero at the expense of our manufacturing industry and producers, and we're now importing stuff that's being made elsewhere.
Elsewhere with a greater emission of CO2.
Yes, precisely.
So by doing that, by pursuing net zero in Britain and exporting our manufacturing, destroying our industries, reducing our economic health, we're actually increasing the amount of CO2 in the world.
You are. We are.
I mean,
yes, I've got that.
We buy stuff made in China by the boatload, which is produced, and their energy is produced by coal-fired power stations, which a new one opens every week.
Yep.
In China. We were building those things before, and we're emitting some CO2, admittedly, but we need CO2. If we didn't have CO2, the world would die. It's terribly important for photosynthesis, for the creation of green, and at the same time, we're cutting down the Amazonian and the Indonesian rainforests. But you've heard me explain all of this before. It's very frustrating. When we could be using what the CO2 that's produced to do good with it.
Yeah.
And we're not.
No, we're not. And as you rightly pointed out, it's really become, well, it's without doubt an ideology. There's political support and motivation, but almost to a standard of a religion.
Well, indeed it is. And I mean, I'll come out with the figures that I've mentioned before. In the world atmosphere, there are 3,200 billion tons of CO2. I'll repeat that. The world atmosphere, 3,200 billion tons. Every year, the world produces 16 billion tons of CO2. That's 1/200th of what's already there in the atmosphere. Now, that's an increase. It's an increase of 1/200th. Now, a lot of that is produced by nature. Some of it is produced by the activity of man. But even the 3.2 billion tons only represents 20% of what's on the planet, because the other 80% is in the oceans.
Now, I read about this only 2 days ago, quite right. But they are worried that facility of the oceans to absorb will be reduced by the fact that the oceans are getting warmer. Is that something you agree with?
Well, the oceans are getting warmer, which may imply that they therefore will evaporate and lose its bulk nature. But that's not true, because the other side of the same argument says that the level of the oceans is rising because of the melting of the polar ice caps.
Yeah.
So there's a compensatory activity conducted by nature, which is happening. So, but remember the scare figures that were told us at the World Summit in 1992. We were told that the temperature would go up by 6%, and the level of the oceans by 2 meters. It went up by like 2 millimeters or something silly like that. I mean, there's so many ridiculous claims being made, and now so much money being made by 500,000 scientists worldwide make their living either directly or indirectly from the global warming ideology. And yet,
yes, I'm sure there's no doubt it's self-serving.
Yeah.
And the ultimate false idol to me is what's her name? Greta Thunberg?
Greta Thunberg, who you now see campaigning on behalf of terrorists against Israel.
Correct.
I mean, how stupid can we be?
Well, you, I, and Keith don't worship her. We're not stupid. That's the whole point of your broadcast on Mirador. There's a level of insight, wisdom, experience of life that comes through Mirador, thanks to you and others. But the problem is, she's one of these people that I think the youngsters call them influencers. And it's not just on the environment. And social media just fuels it. You know, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, all these outlets, X used to be Twitter. And these much younger minds just soak it up like a baby would.
Well, they do, and yes, and that takes us back to again something I've mentioned before, the old Churchillian quote of those who are not a socialist at 20 have got something wrong with their heart, and those who are not a conservative at 30 have got something wrong with their head. So yes, young people have the standard bearers of idealism, and that's not unhealthy. That's healthy. But then the school of hard knocks and reality brings them round to tempering their extreme thoughts and ideas, and hopefully makes good citizens out of them. But if we start listening to 15-year-old kids, and I don't know how old she was when she started wittering on this Thunberg object, but
she was young. I think she was barely in her teens,
15 or 16 or something, and I don't know how old she is now, 20, 21, 22, I'm not sure.
Maximum.
Yeah.
I mean, she looks about 10.
Well, this is right, so, but
and she obviously enjoys wearing handcuffs as well. That's obvious.
Absolutely, yes. But from what I can gather, she's pretty much she's a marionette, a puppet. And people pulling the strings are her parents, who are very highly ideologically committed manipulators. But I don't know.
Who should know better?
Mm-hmm. Well, no. If they feel that they can change the course of the world through manipulating their daughter, and they've certainly got a very active instrument in so doing. They never underestimate these people, and they're pretty bright, and they're probably coming out of it very successfully, both in financial and material terms.
No, that's my problem. I don't underestimate them. I find it all rather sinister. Now, was it the Arctic or the Antarctic you say that gas and oil have been found.
I think if I read it correctly, it's the Antarctic, but I could be wrong. It's
No, I'm just asking because you then moved on to the Arctic,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to be sure, or as sure as we can be, which end of the world.
Well, now it comes. Okay, it's got to be the Antarctic because
It's land.
equal claims are being laid on it by Peru and Argentina. So it's got to be the Antarctic then. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
So your probably correct forecast is that the Russians will either, well, they'll definitely exploit it.
hmm
Whether they give a monkeys about the charter, I mean, they're signatories to lots of things, but they break them on a daily, monthly basis.
Absolutely.
I mean, incredibly, there's some major signatories to a human rights charter, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well, this is it. And of course, remember that this is a charter which is in fact a theoretical charter. That the idea that there should be a section of the map described as the British Antarctic is almost it's a theoretical concept because we have a research presence there. I think there's about a couple of hundred people actually working on research, British people working on research in that part that's supposedly British, but we're not going to defend it the way we would defend Lewis or Yorkshire or somewhere like that. I mean,
I would never defend Yorkshire, Harry. Sorry.
If the Russians moved in with and started exploiting the gas, what would we do? Send a gunboat?
No,
I don't think we have any gunboats, do we anymore?
We don't have any gunboats anymore, and I mean, in all seriousness, do we actually think Russia could actually afford to go mining in the Antarctic?
Oh, I think that financing would be found quite easily if fossil fuels were discovered. There's so much money to be made. What people seem to forget as well in this so-called crazy drive for net zero is that a good 80% of the world's energy still comes from fossil fuels.
Yeah.
I think about 3% or something stupid comes from wind turbines. I mean, or even wind turbines and solar combined.
Yeah.
And we want to eliminate 80% of our energy source and build at the same time, at the same speed in the next 5 years. All these.
Yes. I mean, whoever came up with that deadline of 2030 needed their heads looking at.
Well, even 2050 is tomorrow.
Yes.
How can you dispense with 80% of the world's energy sources between now and 2050? Impossible.
Actually, what occurs to me, Harry, to support your contention about the political ramifications of the Greens, for want of a better word, is what happened in Scotland. As soon as the Scottish government correctly abandoned its loony forecast, its loony objective of becoming net zero in 2 years or something. Again, citing Keith, they needed their heads looking at to even think they could achieve that. The minute they drop that, the Greens say, right, we're not supporting you anymore.
And the coalition broke down, yeah.
And the coalition broke down. So is that not perhaps a worldwide minor example, but a good example of what you're talking about?
Well, it's an example of how the tail wags the dog. And what's more evident than in Oldham, Lancashire, or where I think it is, they've sent an 18-item demand, not request or suggestion, but demand to Rishi Sunak as to what he should do with regards to Palestine. Well, what's he got to do with Palestine? here is our nation, our country, Britain, in deep trouble in so many ways, and we're trying to interfere in the affairs of somebody else somewhere else, and that's being directed. That traffic is being directed by a bunch of people who do not hold our own moral and spiritual and historic, or adhere to our values that are part of a nation which has existed for 800 years.
Yes.
But if you talk like this, you're accused of racism or something.
Well, it'll be next Monday now because I can't see you on Friday. But we did agree, didn't we, by email?
10 o'clock, 8 o'clock, no, 9 o'clock on 9 o'clock your time, isn't it?
What's that? Yeah, but I can't come on Friday. Like today, because I've got to take my wife this time to a medical appointment.
Okay.
So I can't do Friday. I mean, I can pop in later, but you'll have been finished by then. So it'll probably be a week today when I'm able to hook up with you in good time. And this is what I sent you, because you've enlightened us on certainly your take on multiculturalism. Okay. Right. Multiculturalism seeks the inclusion of the views and contributions of diverse members of society while maintaining respect for their differences. And this is this last bit that intrigues me, because I don't think you'll agree with this, and withholding the demand for their assimilation into the dominant culture. Well, you described to me ages ago what you thought multiculturalism meant, which was that it was just a huge melting pot and that everybody sort of leveled up. I may have misunderstood you.
No, multiculturalism as a movement believes that you can sort of bring all sorts of cultures into a society, and each each cultural component continues to function in its own context, and so it's never integrated into a whole. The opposite,
right?
I
did misunderstand you then.
Is assimilation. Now, there's nothing wrong with other groups of people being assimilated and bringing in their if we could work it on a selective basis, their good ideas going into the common mix for the common good. But at least you end up with a slowly evolving ethnic entity, and that's how Britain came into being. We are a nation of immigrants. We are who we are because of the waves of invasions, the Roman invasion, the original Celts, the Danes, the Vikings, and all the people came in. You know, us Yorkshire people, we Yorkshire people have got apparently about 40% DNA Scandinavian on average.
Yeah, you have.
So we, but it's been all absorbed in one composite mass of character. Where we become one people, and during that time we evolve, we espouse a set of values which are British values, and they develop and hopefully with time improve. It's not always sure they do. We seem to be retrogressing a little bit at the moment. But with multiculturalism, that doesn't create that blend. It creates a mix of people where if you're trying to bake a cake, all the components, still the egg and the flour and the sugar and whatever you put into a cake, they're still all identifiable. And when you're chewing on the cake, so you get a taste of egg, and then you're chewing it, and you another bite, you get a taste of flour, and so on and so forth. It never becomes a composite mass.
You need to change your baker, Harry.
Yeah. So. And these are very simplistic ways of explaining the difference between assimilation and multiculturalism, but multiculturalism is proven not to work. And one of the world's leading examples at the moment is the you couldn't have imagined a more stable nation, apart from the Quebec problem. Well, it's not a problem. The antipathy between the French-speaking Canadians and the English-speaking Canadians, embodied in the Quebec situation. You can't imagine a more stable nation than Canada 30, 40 years ago, when Keith and I lived there. Well, now, because of the intrusion of multiculturalism, it's become one of the most fragmented nations in the world. In the world, Canada, stable. I mean, being Canadian was almost bland to a degree to some international thinkers. They're not bland. I think Canadians have got a great deal of character. I think
you're right, Harry. Is seen as the do-gooders of the world. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful country, and yes, very distinct from the American character, but still quite colourful. A nation, an amazing history, but stable to the extent of some people thought boredom. But now it is a nation torn apart by multiculturalism, all brought in by Trudeau père, Trudeau the father, and now this wastrel son of his has taken it one step further, and the whole nation is going strange. I mean, it's a sad decline of a culture, not of a nation, of a culture. It's still a wealthy nation, still very successful, still full of wonderful people, but it is not the nation that Keith and I discovered 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely right. Very, very good analogy, Harry. Because I actually, of course, have still got a number of in-laws there, and I actually do get from what I would have considered to be the sort of people that we would have mixed with 40, 50 years ago, is now in great distress at what's happening, and actually almost revolutionary talk. Yes.
One good bit of news from Canada is that in British Columbia, which was our home province, though I lived for many years afterwards in Quebec, in the French part of Canada, in British Columbia, where they had allowed major drug use on the streets. They've now repealed that law a few days ago, and they are now going to try and clean up the streets and stop people injecting themselves with all sorts of strange substances just on the public sidewalk. It's just amazing to see how far down it had gone. And you can't imagine a more beautiful place on earth than British Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you can. You can. The North Yorkshire coast, of course.
Oh, do give it a rest, Harry. I mean, Carrie, as a matter of interest, how many years of your life have you actually lived in Yorkshire?
Oh, about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
No, I was born in. I'm very proud of being born in Whitby, but I believe I left it when I was 6 weeks old. But then I did grow up further up the coast, in a little town called Saltburn. Got married and lived in Redcar.
Yeah.
Got a job on the local newspaper in Middlesbrough, the Evening Gazette in Middlesbrough, where I started my journalistic career. And so left to Canada in the 60s, early 60s. So I guess about 20. Oh, no. In the meantime, I was in military service, of course, in London.
You were indeed.
So probably maybe 20 years I lived in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yorkshire. Less time than I've been any place else.
Well, I did get that impression, but 20 years isn't too bad an innings. I thought of you yesterday because I was idly watching on YouTube a Parkinson interview with Tommy Cooper, who was a comedian I personally liked a lot. Mm-hmm. And it turned out he was like you, he was a lifeguard.
Mhm.
And he was telling the story how he was so green in terms of horses. This particular horse was looking, because he made it all sound really funny, but the horse he was meant to be saddling up was looking at him very suspiciously. And what he didn't know, and you can confirm whether this is a true account or not, was that an experienced horse who didn't want to be girdled up would blow itself out so that the rookie rider, horseman, would think the saddle was tight. But in fact, as soon as he got on the horse let it in, and he went, I'll say it's him, and ended up underneath the horse. Now, he made that sound hilariously funny, but I thought of you not because that would have happened to you necessarily, but is that a possible accurate story?
Yes, it is, in fact, because what you need to do is to go back to your equitation training when you, many of us never rode before we went in the cavalry. But we went through intensive equitation training where we virtually trained to be circus riders. I mean, every kind of trick we could do on a horse at the end. Some of our guys got jobs as stunt riders at Elstree or in Hollywood even. Some of them even went on and became film stars. Ray Milland became, you wouldn't remember him anyway, but
Ray Milland, yes.
Wallace Beery, no, anyway. But and so during the equitation training, we trained on horses that would never ever be suitable for public duty because they were so wild and difficult to control, and they had all of these tricks up their sleeve or up their foot, and so indeed, yes, I could see horses doing that. But by the time we got to up to Knightsbridge, we did our basic training, military training, equitation training in Combermere Barracks in Windsor. But by the time we got up to Knightsbridge and became, part of the Royal Escort, by then we had really superb horses that were highly trained and with whom we developed a bond, because once you got there, you got your own horse. You maybe helped look after all of the horses in the troop, but in ceremonial duties, you always got the same horse, with very rare exception, unless he was ill. By that time, you had a relationship so that they wouldn't play those tricks on you. So the story bears, it could well be a truthful story relating to a period of time when we were training, when horses would pull every trick under the book, and horses are damned intelligent. In fact, many of the horses were much more intelligent than some of the people I served with, but particularly.
I think with those horsey stories, we'd better leave it. Otherwise, Declan will not have a pub left. But thank you both. I think that the experiment which I talked about in my note to you has worked quite well today. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll report back to Philip on next week as to whether it worked the rest of the week as well. So thank you both very much. A very entertaining hour again. And
Keith, that we're not on Friday then.
No, we are on Friday. Yes.
We are on Friday, 10 o'clock your time.
Yes.
Oh, no, 9 o'clock your time.
9 o'clock our time, yes.
On Friday. Okay.
But then on Monday, Harry, there'll be your regular slot with me and Keith.
Okay.
Which will be 10 o'clock our time.
That's correct. Okay.
Yes.
And Keith, I will see you with John Prideaux at 9 o'clock on Wednesday.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
bye-bye.
Good to talk to you all. Talk to everybody. God bless you all. I'm not sure
Harry,
which God, but that's a motivational statement.
Who was it who that you told me said youth is wasted on the young?
George Bernard Shaw.
It was Shavian, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Toodles.
Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, an entertaining morning, and it is a good replication of Friday's jamboree with different players. So we are moving in the right direction. So until tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, this is Keith Hayes with Muriel Television from as you can see, from the Black Horse in Lewes. Bye-bye.